Hello and welcome to ETeeski Tutorials. You are watching the Ultimate Game Dev Tutorial Series. So what is the Ultimate Game Dev Tutorial Series, you might ask? Well, it is a tutorial series that's going to teach you how to make a video game from the ground up using all free software on both PC and Mac. So yeah, that's right, you can make video games using all free software, and it's really not as hard as you would think that it is to make a video game. You don't need to go to some kind of specialized school, you don't need any kind of supercomputer, you don't need expensive software. All you really need is this tutorial series and access to Google search, and you're pretty much good to go, and you can actually start learning how to make games right away. And well, that's what this tutorial series is going to teach you. And like I said, everything in this tutorial series, all the tools that we're going to be using are free. And the first tool that you see in front of you is Unity3D, and this is actually where we're going to be creating a game in. And why don't I go ahead and run the game so you can kind of see a little demo of what the game is going to look like, and it's taking just a second to load. Alright, there we go. So the game has loaded, and this is a game that I have called Indoctrination. And it's a story about a kid who falls asleep in class, and he dreams that his high school is taken over by robots, and he gets superpowers, and he can fight robots, and he can do a bunch of cool stuff. So yeah, that is what we're going to be learning how to create, and we're going to create both the code and artwork for this video game. So I guess in this tutorial, I want to just get you familiar with the different parts of 3D video games, and we're going to talk a little bit about the very basics and the software that we're going to be using in this tutorial series. So I guess the first part of a 3D video game is the engine that you're going to be using, and in this case, we're going to be using Unity3D, which is free, and you can get that on Unity3D.com. There's the website right there. I'll put a link in the description below, and you can download it, and it's for PC and Mac, and the basic version is free, and it's awesome. I've been using it for the past like 5 years to make video games, and I've loved it. I think it's a super awesome piece of software. There's other game engines out there available as well. You've probably heard of the Frostbite engine, or what is that, the Far Cry engine. Let's see, there's also the Unreal engine, and well, honestly, the list goes on, and there's pros and cons to all of them. But one of the most common engines that I see used by indie video game developers is Unity3D, and a lot of really cool games have been made using Unity3D. If you just search games made with Unity, a lot of games will come up. There's some really cool ones. I think Guns of Icarus is a really good example. And well, there's really just an endless number of examples, but it's a really powerful piece of software, and this is basically the piece of software that we're going to be using to basically bring everything together. We're going to bring all of our artwork into here, all of our sound effects, all of our code, and then we're going to start putting things around in 3D space and building our levels. Like, see, like this pillar, I can just like move it over and put it wherever I want. I'm going to hit Control Z because that's not where I wanted it. But yeah, this is Unity3D, so go download it. It's awesome. That's what we're going to be using. So yeah, let's move on and start talking about the other pieces of video game development. So I guess the two biggest parts of video game development are art and code. And for code, we're going to be using something called MonoDevelop, and this comes with Unity. So when you install Unity, you also install MonoDevelop, and basically this is where we're going to write our code. And you can see there's a lot of code here. And this might look really complicated, but don't worry, this tutorial series is going to break all of this down step by step, and you'll see that everything you see in front of you actually really isn't as complicated as it looks. And this basically all just determines the behavior of our game and how everything moves and behaves, and you know, the player jumps when the player presses A, and you know, all of that stuff. So yeah, we're going to be learning how to write code. And once we write that code, we can apply it to the game objects that are in our scene in Unity3D. So Unity3D, the actual Unity editor, it's kind of like the middle ground between art and code, because we write our code and we bring it in here, and then we make our artwork and we bring it in here. And to make our artwork, we're going to be using two different programs in this tutorial series. We're going to be using Blender and GIMP. both of those are free, and for PC and Mac. But I'll show you Blender first. Where is it? There's Blender. So here's the character. As you can see, I got a little timeline here, and you can kind of see the animations that I've been working on. So yeah, this is what we're going to be using to create 3D models. But you'll see that our character is really gray and boring, and we need to add some color and texture to this character. And that's what we're going to be using GIMP for. And you can see that I have all of the colors and textures and, you know, yeah, just like the surface texture of what this character is going to look like all right here. And we create those in 2D images, and then we combine that with our 3D model, and then when we're done, we bring it into Unity, and it's going to look something like this. And that's, of course, how we create everything that you see in front of you here. We create the model, we create the texture, and then we bring it into Unity. And that is also something we're going to be learning in this tutorial series. So one thing I should mention about this tutorial series is it's going to be broken up into two different parts: art and code. And I would highly encourage you to try to learn both. In the end, you're probably going to choose one over the other, whichever one you like the most and whatever you have the most fun doing. Most people choose one or the other, but I would highly encourage you to at least learn the basics of both. And I think either one that you choose, this tutorial series is going to teach you the basics and a little bit above and beyond from that. And honestly, by the time you end up watching this whole tutorial series, you will be a video game developer. You will know how to make video games. And I guess what else should I tell you about this tutorial series? Each episode is going to range from about 30 minutes to an hour long. Everything's broken up into chapters. And while the tutorials themselves are going to be free right here on YouTube, there are a couple of paid optional extras that are pretty cool if you want to take it to the next level. And those optional but awesome paid extras are the PDF guide, which is basically like a digital book. I don't want to say book, but basically it's a guide that goes hand in hand with these tutorial series. This is just going to basically be like notes and summarization, and just basically kind of like somewhat of a written version of this tutorial series. Just, to have some reading material to go along with this tutorial series in case you are a reader learner kind of person. Or there is also the art pack. That is another paid extra, and that would be for the people who want to learn just the code, because you're going to need some artwork to work with when you're creating your video game. You can code stuff and have everything look really boring, but at some point you're going to need to learn how to bring this artwork into the video game itself. So if you're one of the people who just wants to learn just the code, then go ahead and pick yourself up the art pack and bring in all of the artwork completely completed that you can import into your video game, and that will give you time to focus on just the code. The last optional but awesome paid extra is the project files, and basically that's just a finished copy of everything that we're going to learn how to create in this tutorial series. So that's useful if you want to just see what the final product is going to look like before you create it, like you want to take it apart and just dissect it and figure out how it works, or if you want to compare your project against the finished project as you're creating your game through this tutorial series. If you run into any problems, you can see how the final finished product looks and compare it to your own, and you might figure out what you might be doing wrong at some point, or anything along those lines. So yeah, those are the paid extras, and there will be links in the description below to more information about those. So yeah, I guess that pretty much summarizes the information about this tutorial series. A quick introduction to the different pieces of software we're going to be using. Let me show you those websites again. We have Unity3D.com. That's where you get our video game engine. It's a really awesome video game engine for creating, well, both 2D and 3D games, but in this case we're going to be learning how to create a 3D game. The next piece of software is Blender, and that is this one that I showed you here for creating the 3D models. Let me go back to the internet. There we go. So that's blender.org. Blender is free. That is the full version. It's a really awesome piece of software. Might be a little bit tricky to use at first. I like to describe it as riding a bike. It's weird at first, but once you get a hang of it, it's very easy and very fast. And yeah, it just becomes muscle memory. But yeah, the full version of Blender is free, and a lot of professionals use it to create some really awesome stuff. Yeah, Blender is really, really awesome for creating 3D models, and you can even take it to make just images and movie files, kind of like pretty much like the quality of Pixar movies if you really get good with this software. So this software has a lot of potential, and the entire full version is free. There's no like pro version or anything. It's just simply free, which is just super awesome. And then last, we're going to be using GIMP, and you can find that at gimp.org. This is for PC and Mac. It's kind of like the free version of Photoshop. It's for creating 2D images and 2D graphic art, and it is also pretty awesome for, well, creating 2D images and pictures and textures, and we're going to be using that in this tutorial series, and that is also free on both PC and Mac. And there's two other pieces of software that we're going to be using later on in the tutorial series. I might as well show you them now. We have Audacity. This is just an audio editor for editing audio files and recording audio files. So we're going to be playing around with this a little bit later in this tutorial series. And we're also going to be playing around with Rain by Rival Theory. And if you click right here where it says Rain, this is where you go to download it. Basically, this is for creating the artificial intelligence in our video game. Yeah, it basically it makes our enemies, like, you know, the enemy soldiers or the enemy robots, whatever we create in our video game. This is what makes them think and move and all of that cool stuff. And yeah, you don't have to download this right now, but yeah, we're going to be using it later in this tutorial series. So I just thought that I'd give you a heads up. So yeah, that's all the software we're going to be using. All of it's free, and all of it's for both PC and Mac, and we're going to teach you how to do all of it. You know, if you ever wonder to yourself, you're like, I want to make video games, but I don't know how. Well, you've come to the right place. That's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be learning how to make video games, and you don't need any kind of a special computer or anything. Honestly, if your computer can browse the internet, your computer is good enough to make video games and use all of the software that I just showed you. So you will be set to go to start making video games today. So that's pretty awesome. So yeah, I guess that pretty much concludes this tutorial. It wasn't much of a tutorial, more of a introduction to this tutorial series and what this tutorial series is going to be like. It is going to be kind of a long tutorial series. It's going to be, honestly, many hours of work. Like, to get through the tutorial series, I'd say a minimum of like 50 hours it's going to take you to get through it and work on it and learn it. Probably more. But, you know, that is asking a lot, but this tutorial series is going to give you a lot as well. You're really going to walk away from this tutorial series knowing how to make video games. And honestly, that is something that usually takes years of work. At least, like, I'd say you could probably learn how to get, you know, the basics of video games done in about a year worth of work without, you know, the tutorial, or without this tutorial series, like with tutorial series and other resources already available on the internet, and all of those are awesome as well. But with this tutorial series, you know, however long it takes you to put in the hours, somewhere between like 50 to 100 hours to get through this, you know, it will take a while, but it's going to be well worth it, and you're going to learn a lot about how to create video games. And, you know, I think it's going to be really awesome. And if you want to learn how to make video games, well, this tutorial series is going to set you on the right path. So one last thing I want to talk about before I end this tutorial series is I want to talk about X, Y, and Z in 3D space. If you already know about X, Y, and Z in 3D space, like if you've taken a math class in school, then no problem, you can go ahead and just skip over this, but I know that a lot of people watching this might be completely new to the idea of 3D space. So I'm going to go ahead and explain what X, Y, and Z are, because that's kind of the fundamental of a 3D video game. So we'll talk more about this later, but let's go ahead and just explain the concept of it. So here I have an image of X and Y, and you can imagine these as number lines that you can count. And basically, if you give two numbers, an X number and a Y number, that'll put you somewhere. It'll give you a position, a point somewhere on this graph. And I can turn, wait, wrong image. that image on, you can see that it makes a graph. And let's say I give the number 3, 4. So 3 would be x, 4 would be y. So we go over on the x, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 on y, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's our position 3, 4, which is x3 and y4. And that gives us a position somewhere in this 2D area. But we can also give it negative numbers and go towards this direction. Like let's say we did -3, +4. That would be -3, so we go negative this way. 1, 2, 3. That's -3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be -3, 4 right here. And then if it was -3, -4, that would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see the combination of using two numbers, an x and y, can give us a position anywhere in this 2D area, and it's very similar to any kind of graph that you've probably looked at before. So that's 2D. So that's 2 dimensions. The first dimension is x, and the second dimension is y. But we're creating a 3D game, a 3-dimensional game. So that means we need to have an x, y, and z. So let me turn that off and I can show you x, y, and now we have z, which z is forward and back. So x is left and right, y is up and down, and z is forward and back. If I start turning on some graphs, you can see how this also gives us a grid. So this grid would represent, the x and z. So we can find a position forward and back as well as up and down and left and right. And I can also put a graph right there to show you. So this graph would represent y and z position. And then, whoops, there's too many graphs. And that graph would represent the x and y position. So the combination of these two different areas, like if I combine those two, you can see how this is starting to look really 3D. And this is a 3D graph that's going to give us a position in 3D space, just like how two numbers give us a position in 2D space. So let's just give one example of an x, y, and z. Let's say we want a number that's a vector 3 or a position in 3D space in x, y, and z that is, 3, 2, 4. So that would be 3 on x, 2 on y, and 4 on z. And I probably got to turn that off so that we can see it a little bit better. So if we go 3 on x, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to go up on the y-axis by, what did I say, 2? So let's just imagine we could see the graph here, 1, 2, and then we need to go forward on the z-axis by, I can't remember what I said, 4? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's kind of weird with the position of my mouse because you can't really see 3D, but you can imagine how those three numbers, you can give them all three of those numbers, either positive or negative. If it's z negative, you're going to go in that direction. If it's z positive, you're going to go in that direction. But you can see how those three numbers can give you any position in 3D space. And if I go back into Unity, you can see, like, let's take this character, for example. If I zoom in here, I'll actually go full screen on that. If I zoom in here, you can see I have an arrow, an arrow, and an arrow for changing the position of this guy. And actually, let me grab a different object. Let's see, I think I want to grab this object. Yeah, there we go. So now you can see I can grab that arrow to drag him that way. That's my Z. This arrow to drag him that way. That's my X. And that arrow to drag him up and down. That is my Y. And we're going to be talking more later about these different arrows and how to use them and how to move stuff around. But you can see that we have numbers here in X, Y, and Z to represent the position in 3D space. So if I start changing the X number, you can see it change. I'm moving him left and right. If I start changing the Y number, I'm moving him up and down. And Z, forward and back. So those three numbers change your position in 3D space. And we can also use a similar technique to start doing rotations. You can see that Y is rotating around the Y-axis, and we can give that number anywhere between 0 and 360, and 360 degrees is a full circle. So between those three numbers, we can also get a rotation, and we can also get a scale for stretching how tall or short or wide our character is, as you can see. So yeah, that was my quick explanation of XYZ. I just wanted to give you that explanation because we're going to be referencing X, Y, and Z constantly in this tutorial series. And if it doesn't make full sense to you right now, don't worry about it. You at least kind of have the basics, and you know, the more you use it, the more it'll make sense, and the more examples we use, the more it will just make sense, and you'll know how to use X, Y, and Z. So yeah, that was an introduction to this tutorial series. In our next episode, we're going to start learning a little bit more about Unity and how to move these windows around and what these different windows do. And we're going to start talking more about making video games. So yeah, stay tuned for this tutorial series. It's going to be really awesome. You're going to learn how to make video games, and that is just super awesome because it is an awesome time in history to start making video games, because honestly, we're on the verge of an indie video game revolution. And that means that no longer are these giant companies the only people who can actually make video games and make successful video games. The power is in small people like you and me now. We don't need billions of dollars to create video games. We can create video games without even spending a penny, right in our own homes, without going to school or anything. All of the information is already available to you on the internet, and that is super awesome. So there are a lot of places on the internet, speaking of which, that you can get other resources for learning how to create video games, and I'll put some links in the description below to those, and you can click around and explore those. The Unity community online, just people who use Unity3D, are very friendly, and there's lots and lots of them. And yeah, that is an awesome advantage because you can go on the internet and talk with other people using the same software as you to create video games. And yeah, it's just an awesome time to be creating video games. So yes, without further ado, let's end this tutorial and really get into learning how to create video games. So until next time, I will see you later, and keep making games.